Hello, friends. Welcome to the pre-season episodes of Making Me Visible. Joy and I, over the next couple of episodes, are going to begin some of our conversations, and we're going to ask you, the audience and the listeners, to help us start developing some ideas for future episodes. We are looking for some feedback and also just testing out some of the technical things. Stay in contact and hope you enjoy these first couple of preliminary episodes.
Making Me Visible. Speaking ourselves into existence. Making Me Visible is a podcast about amplifying the often token and invisible voices of those who grow up and are caught in between cultures. It does this by drawing deeply on the lived experiences of faith, community, church, and hybrid identities. Join your hosts Cyrus Kung and Joy Han as they ask questions, listen carefully, and speak into existence voices that are nestled in the margins.
Before we get into anything, I thought maybe we could just spend these kind of like first 5-10 minutes to kind of give a bit of a story update, maybe for like a Cyrus's point of view and Joy's point of view of like why we want to get started on this, and what kind of drew us to having some of these conversations. I don't know, Joy, you want to kick us off? Some thoughts and...
Yeah, I mean, for me, there are so many like small one-on-one, I mean, small as in the volume, the number of people there, but we cover a lot of big topics in, my one-on-ones with you and like so many people. And yeah, I feel we cover really important topics, but then a lot of the time it's, for whatever reason, it's not a wider conversation. And I would love to experiment with how we can, cover those important and interesting topics with more people.
Yeah, I think that's definitely my heart of it all as well. I think like often we have very good conversations, and I think we bring it to like another level, and it's kind of exciting talking about these things because I don't always get people who might have maybe read in the same spaces or interested in
Right.
the same spaces. But I think one of the things that we picked up also is that we also have differing opinions, even though, or different focuses, even though maybe in the wider screen of, where we're engaged in the uniting church and all these sorts of things, that people might be like, oh yeah, like they're probably on the same page over there in the
Yes.
CALD thing, and they're kind of second gen in
Yes.
that space, and they're both Asian, so they're probably in the same space. So I think like
Exactly.
bringing some nuance into the conversation, I think that's something that I'm excited about as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and like another key word for me would be like these conversations that, happen all the time for me. They are so life-giving. And again, wanting to just be able to share that with more people. And exactly as you said, there are a lot of, nuances that we cover when you have that space. And so again, to be able to kind of introduce that to more and more people, because it's it's kind of, it is frustrating when you are in other spaces and you can't even start because there's just so much like a lack of shared understanding, or so many assumptions that are in place. And maybe it's those one-on-one or more intimate conversations where we're able to break out of those assumptions. So again, wanting to be able to share that with more people and have a dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something in here about like maybe partly to do with our Asianness and maybe how we communicate, and maybe there's a comfortability here in this context as we share as well, that like I would love others to hear. It's like, oh, like, you know, there's a different type of personality, or there's a different type of conversation that maybe it's not always safe to do, or maybe it's not always
Yeah.
easy to do in other contexts, that hopefully might I think both challenge, but also maybe enlighten some people in our different contexts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We'll get into some topics in a sec. Joy and I made a list here, so we're just gonna like hit up some of those keywords as we go. But I think context is always really important for me, and I think this is an ongoing thing. I think as we make this podcast, that you'll get to know more of our context. But I thought, Joy, you can start. In like 50 words or less. Like, how do you describe yourself? Like now that we're gonna put you in a box, like what are some important things we need
Oh,
to know about you?
yeah, literally, I feel like I could say my whole story is about breaking out of the boxes trying to break out of the boxes that I'm put into. And yeah, like even when you said our Asianness before, I was totally triggered. And I'm like, I don't even consider that a category, as Zizek would say, a category of truth. I'll try not to quote Zizek too much. Cover that another time. But like ethnicity, hang on, let me say, okay, in 50 words or less, I'm probably way over already. But when people like the next person who asks me in a church context, like, are you Korean? And like something like that, I'm gonna be like, who are my mother and brothers? Like, why is that my family that you associate me with? When I want to be able to say who my mother and brothers are. Okay, I think
Yeah.
that's way over the limit. But yeah, let's start there.
Oh, very good. Okay. That sounds good. I'm just thinking about how I would answer that question now that you've given that
Go
preface.
on, yeah.
Um, uh, I think what that brings up for me, I think things that I would usually say, right? Because, we're always in these circles, is that I would say I'm second gen Hong Kong Australian, Hong Kong Chinese Australian, and probably I'll chuck in minister in there just to throw people
Right.
off because I think those things, or maybe especially in real life. I imagine this will just be a podcast. People can't see what I look like, but that I think throws people a curveball a little bit. But I think as I say those things, like those things mean certain things to me, but maybe part of the conversations, the ongoing conversations that we have is that the way that people understand that or the way that people perceive those things are different to how maybe I perceive them as well. So it's like, I know what
Yes.
I mean when I say these things, but what does it
Right.
mean in the broader context? And I wonder if that's like a reason why we don't often, I think in a lot of kind of whatever context that we're in, younger, second gen, like it's hard to kind of, like put myself back into a box after you spend so much of your time trying to get out of a box, right?
Yeah. That's funny. That just gave me a thought that there are certain contexts where I'm like totally comfortable to say that I'm second gen. Ise is like Korean for second gen and or second gen migrant. But there are other like English language contexts where I am very hesitant, like reluctant to say that because
Yeah.
of certain baggage that comes. So yeah, context.
Baggage. Oh, very good.
Mm.
Maybe we should dive into that now. Like,
Oh
where's
no.
your baggage, Joy? Should we start there?
Okay. Oh
Um,
gosh.
um,
Sure. Yeah. I
so,
mean,
actually, before we get there, one more thing is like,
hmm,
there's this kind of connection, I guess, or how we met. Maybe people would be interested in that. Like, like we've known each other for a little while, I think. Like we
mhm.
met a little while ago. We've kind of stayed connected in different uniting church circles and contexts. Um, where would you say you're at in life at the moment? I think just to, like
Um,
why now? Why is joy like, why has the universe aligned to the point where we're having this conversation now?
yeah, I mean, a key milestone for me is that I just graduated my Master of Theological Studies, which was nearly a 7-year journey of part-time study.
Yeah.
And, a lot of learnings and a lot of kind of realization of the freedom that I have to say no to being asked to do um a lot of churchy things, but also kind of growing my own confidence to discern where my best gifts might be. and to be able to focus on those. So
Mhm.
yeah, focusing on what's the most life-giving for me, or where I feel I can most make make a contribution most powerfully. So yeah, I think this is where I'm exploring part of that.
Yeah. Oh, very good. And pet topics at the moment? Do you have any? Are there things that
Yes.
you're really keen about to talk about?
I mean, I don't know. Pet topics and being keen could be slightly different things, but
Okay, yeah.
definitely this whole how we understand the missionality of lay people, um, and a certain blindness to the lives that lay people live outside of their church involvement.
Mm-hmm.
I think, that's a really, yeah, pet topic or key concept that's actually helping me tie together a lot of my like long-standing reflections around colonization and around racialization as well. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exploring that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that is like it's great. That there's this kind of lay ordained
Yes.
about it, because I feel like we would have so many similarities, I think, in terms of our context, but then obviously that is a big kind of a difference maybe in our lived experience of everyday life at the moment as well.
Yes, that's really, yeah, that's interesting.
Okay. Well, that might be a good place to start. We've got that on our list, like lay versus ordained. Like,
I
is
mean, should I return some of those questions back to you as well?
yeah,
Like
okay, yeah,
how you're here.
yeah. How I'm here. That's a good
What
question.
did you say? The universal line to how you got here. Is that
Yeah,
what you said? Yeah.
that's a good question. Well, this is something that I've always been like, these conversations are things that give me life. Like, I love having these conversations.
Mm.
Whether or not that's like, you know, my kind of theological nerdiness coming out and wanting to like dive deep and understand. But I think if I was to be more, I don't know, vulnerable or open, I think there's a sense of like wanting to know what it is that I know. And our podcast is going to be called Making Me Visible, or speaking ourselves into existence. And I think so much a part of what we think and what we experience and what we do is subconscious. And I
Mm.
think when we get together and we begin to speak these things out and we get to engage these things in real life, we get to see them in front of us. And I think doing that in community, doing that together, is is how we build together what it is that we actually believe. Maybe that's like our construction of our theology or something like that. Speaking, but even without using that language, it's a fun thing to engage with. And I think for me it helps me understand maybe a bigger sense of my own purpose and use in the world. Um, yeah, apart from the other, good things like fighting for justice and offering people pastoral care and all of those sorts of things that I do
Mm.
maybe in everyday life. But there's an existential question that I think I'm wanting to engage with and answer as well in the midst of these conversations. Mm.
I want to throw in a thought that I had about
Yeah, yeah.
something, yeah, that I also am really conscious of is when I say these kinds of one-on-one conversations are super life-giving. I think a big part of that is that they're very, very safe spaces in a
Mm,
way that, other wider spaces are not safe. And what I am a little like what's a little bit scary, but I want to explore is how like sometimes I've noticed sometimes where I'm so used to a kind of consensus building attitude that I always want to kind of find a commonality and agree,
yeah.
say with like especially in a one-on-one conversation, or we we tend to focus on where we do agree, and then um there maybe sometimes isn't enough kind of enough asking myself, enough exploration of where the differences are. And then I don't know, I'm trying to see how a little bit more, like I think when you said vulnerability, it kind of got me thinking about that because it's
Hmm.
it's I think it takes some vulnerability to be able to, yeah, to disagree and also be okay with sharing this kind of conversation with a wider audience where they may not agree, right? And that's a little bit scary, but I think important to try. So,
Yeah, yeah. There's something in there, like about, I think, going
yeah.
back to this theme around like about voice and speaking and safety. Um,
Mm.
uh,
Safety is a difficult word, but like, let's just roll with it for now. This whole thing of like, um, okay, like if we say, I don't know, like, shall I pick the keyword there, racism?
yeah, okay. Yeah, sure.
Like when you're in a one-on-one conversation with someone whom you know has had very similar experiences of racism to you, like that's that's a very like that has a certain level of safety that you don't have elsewhere. And so what I want that safety. Like I want the more of the world to have that safety. Like I want, in other words, we
Yeah,
want to eliminate racism, right?
yeah,
But to even say that racism is a thing in so many spaces is like that's too confronting. Like that's I feel like I'm making other people feel unsafe. And so there's just like this spiraling out into like, how do I even start this conversation? And it goes nowhere. And so then and then I will retreat into these one-on-one conversations where it's like, okay, this is where it's safe. I'm okay to talk about what happened the other day in the street, right?
yeah,
And but then we never kind of socialize that. We never get to speak about that, and nothing changes. Like that's the traumatic thing. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I I can totally think of examples of like times in which maybe uh you you know, for me anyway, I bump into like another person of color or at a meeting or at something, and there's an unspoken connection there around like what we
yeah,
can and cannot say.
hmm,
And maybe, thinking or leaving that meeting and thinking, oh, I think things went okay and, everything's all right. And then talking to this person later and then was like, and then all of a sudden unpacked this whole thing of like, oh, what was actually happening there? Or like, I felt so uncomfortable at this point, and then almost being like,
right,
oh yeah, like maybe I suppressed a lot of that. Hey, or like,
hmm,
or is there something else going on in that space that I'm not aware of, or are we just so used to being kind of on the margins and maybe the minority in the room that it's harder to speak out at that time? I don't know. Is that is that is
yeah.
that, is that kind of where you're getting at, or am I hitting something else?
Yeah, and 100%. Like even this conversation right now, like as I'm conscious of an audience out there, I'm not prepared to actually say what happened in the street the other day. Whereas if it was really one-on-one, like I mean, yeah, it would be different. I mean, I can say I'm prepared to say on this recording,
Yeah.
but like we're having this whole meta discussion about the politics of that. That's what.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I wonder if anyone that would have a problem would be listening to us anyway. But that's kind of the that's I think that's kind of the discussion that we'll be having. Hopefully we'll talk more of, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um yeah, I don't know. You've
Should
got
we go
history.
there?
Sorry?
Should we go there? Maybe not. FXE, like, okay,
I
that's
think I think
scary.
it's
Really
teasing. Like I think
scary.
there's plenty more I want to
Okay.
say about in that space. Especially like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like this going back to the title again as well, right? It's like, what is it that we're allowed to say? What is it that
Yeah.
we feel like we can say in what context, Like I think an experience that both of us have, maybe a shared experience, don't want to put this in your mouth, but like I think is that I think we both write, or we both have a sense of a professional or an academic kind of voice, I think, in certain
Yes.
circles in some places. And
Yeah.
if I spend the time to write it in a nicely kind of fashioned way, even if I'm saying something very strongly, that can be received quite well. And I feel like there's a space there. But I think it's not as common to be in maybe more of a kind of explorative space like this, or a less formal space like this. Then I'm like, oh, I have to be more careful around how I shape my words, or how
Right.
how we have the conversations.
Yeah. Also, like one thing is when I say, shall we go there? Like, shall I talk about what happened in the street the other day? The
Yeah.
reality is, if we were truly one-on-one, I actually wouldn't tell you, because like I wouldn't need to tell you. Like you would have had that similar kind of experience all the time, and it's not something worth articulating. But there's an unspoken shared understanding there. So that's also like, how do you share that? That's an embodied thing. And so
Yeah.
I guess we have to, like, there is a translation process maybe that would need to happen. So that's all new and interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to come back to that, like as like a kind of like a point, like what's going on in the subconscious, like what's going on in our subconscious that we don't necessarily think of. Like for me, that's, this is where
Yeah.
I would use the second gen thing. Like I think that is very much like a second gen experience, or like a between cultures person, like a third culture kid or whatever. Like all of those kind of subconscious things we do in order to um navigate the world, like what do we say in what context and what we
Right.
don't. And
Yeah.
like I'm sure there'll be people that will tell me, well, we all do that in different contexts, but
Yeah, I was just thinking,
but
like,
but from
yeah,
a racial and an
yeah,
ethnicity perspective, like there are things that I say in certain racial groups that I wouldn't say in another racial group.
absolutely, absolutely.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's shared experience, is that, a wider sense of racism. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got 4 minutes left. Like, let's
Okay.
um like we kind of briefly touched on this, but the other one there that's glaring at me is uniting church. That's something that has held our conversations together. Any
For
food for
sure.
thought, or conversations or thoughts that you have for that, or just church in general, maybe like uh, institution and organization. Has that been a good thing or a bad thing? I'm a minister, so it should be a good thing for me.
Why don't you go first on this?
um, I find home in the Uniting Church in so many ways, um, but
Me
that's
too.
not the place in which I grew up. I met in a Uniting Church building, but the faith um, that I had been taught and was passed down to me felt like it looked very different to how it was acted out into this place. And the Uniting Church and its and all of what it is has always felt like something that I've grown into, and or like fell into and then was like, what is this? And then kind of like walked further into the mystery of it and was like, oh, like now I'm here and in amongst this place. Um, but still very much feeling like an outsider, and like I would name that as the kind of pilgrim thing. Maybe we're all meant to feel a little bit outsidered in the Uniting Church. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was like, let's say, born into the Uniting Church, and it's yeah, it was kind of always very much part of my identification with church. But then, as we know, there are different aspects or different experiences of the Uniting Church, which I feel I've had like a few of those. So that maybe like one of the things I want to mention is that um I, like, as I said, I was born into the Uniting Church, But it wasn't till I went to my first NCYC as a 26-year-old that I first heard about the covenant. And that experience, like even first time understanding who Congress is, who Congress are, and that maybe that's why I'm still in the Uniting Church.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about the words that we create, which I think we often talk about in a negative way, but that actually also has attracted me too. Because in a lot of other contexts I've been in, it's like, oh, we didn't even really have those words. Um, yeah.
Mm.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, there's 1 minute left, and I'm sure there will be more conversations that we have, and we plan on releasing 2 more of these kind of pre-season. What are we going to talk about? The next couple will probably maybe have a little bit more structure, but definitely not a clear structure. But hopefully, yeah, we would love your feedback on what it is that we could continue to talk about. Let us know, and we continue making and talking.